Hello and welcome to Connect and Collaborate. I am Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and I am so excited because this week we are featuring Colorado Business Roundtable partners. And I have in studio with me Kalin. He is with Pinnacol Assurance, one of our great partners that we have for the Colorado Business Roundtable. How are you doing today, Phil?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful summer day and another reason we live in Colorado.
Exactly, right? Over 300 days of sunshine a year.
Exactly.
I'm pretty sure that's a tagline now for Colorado.
It's one I think about.
Yes, absolutely. So Phil is with Pinnacol Assurance. He's the CEO, and so thank you so much for joining us today. Let's talk a little bit about your background and how you got to Pinnacol and why you think it's such a great place to be.
Okay. Well, I told somebody the other day that I'm a recovering healthcare executive. So I spent the first 20 years of my career running hospitals and came to Colorado. I was very lucky back in the early 90s and ran Rose Medical Center.
Oh, wow.
So lots of connections. And a lot of people tell me about their Rose babies. And then I went off and did a couple of software startups. Mm-hmm. And even after I sold one of those, got involved with private school education. So I've done a variety of things, a couple of data plays, data technology, and then received a call that I feel very fortunate to have received, which was whether I had some interest to lead Pinnacol Assurance, which is one of Colorado's longest running businesses, where we celebrated 100 years a couple years ago.
Oh, wow.
As a Colorado business, and we cover about 60% of Colorado businesses, close to 1 million employees employed by those businesses. So I'm very proud to be the CEO of a great organization.
Yeah, and it sounds like you've got a lot of experience coming into this role for sure, right?
I do.
Yeah. So let's talk about Pinnacol Assurance,
Sure.
right? For those that don't know, you pay insurance, yes, for Colorado businesses.
Yeah, so it's called workers' compensation insurance. Yes. And essentially anybody that employs more than one person needs to have workers' compensation insurance. That came out of the early 1900s, something that Teddy Roosevelt had supported. And there was essentially a grand bargain that was struck and is still talked about, that essentially that businesses will provide insurance coverage that would cover both medical costs as well as lost time, essentially at 2/3 wages. And for that, businesses, so employees would get that in order to help support them get back to work, get healthy. And then businesses that provide that insurance don't get sued for negligence generally. So
okay.
that's the grand bargain. And it's evolved over the years, obviously, but it's called workers' compensation insurance.
Yeah, which is something like I guess you don't think much about, particularly if you have an office job, right?
Right.
Yeah, you're kind of at a computer all day. You don't think you're going to need workman's compensation, but it is always great to have it. And
Sure.
You guys are on the top of your game providing that for
Yes,
Colorado
we get a
companies.
lot of great feedback on what we do.
Well, what would you consider to be Pinnacle's biggest advantage?
Well, our biggest advantage is number one, that we've been around for 100 years and we only work in Colorado. Okay. We were started at one time through state action, so we still have some connections back to the state. The governor appoints our board, and so we are required to take all comers. So any business that approaches us and would like to have workers' compensation, they can be assured that we're going to provide them that at the appropriate cost based on the risk of the business. So we've organized ourselves around centers of excellence, so different industry types. So we are very proud of the fact that we have great insights into whether you're running a bakery shop, a hospital, construction, oil and gas. We have teams of people that both underwrite the business, understand it, claims people that work with injuries that might be more germane to different industries, and then safety and return to work people that are working with those kinds of businesses all the time.
Wow. You guys are really set up there. Let's talk about this customer focus that you guys really
Sure.
take. Yeah, that's something that a lot of big businesses like yourselves don't necessarily put out, right? They're focused on business and less so on a customer. But this is really exciting that you guys have such a big customer focus.
Well, it's something that certainly we are very, very focused on. What's the future look like, and what are some of the trends? And I would guess that every one of us, has our Amazon accounts, and love to get on the phone to to do what we want when we want it, and get the kinds of services that will be fast, inexpensive, etc. And all of that is born out of companies that are totally dialed into what does the customer want. I always use the story of the work that Apple did. I am a huge music fan, and I had this great Sony Walkman that had all the bells and whistles, and I didn't realize that what I really wanted was to have that first iPod where I could have all of my music together. And that was born out of a company, Apple, that is known for its customer focus. Mm-hmm. And so as we look at the future of business, of all those that we serve and our own as an insurance company, we are thinking all the time, what do our different customers want, and how do we go out and really walk in their shoes so that we have a deep understanding of their pain points, what would be experiences that would wow them, and how do we design around, whether it's for injured workers, whether it's for our policyholders, the businesses, whether it's agents that we work with that provide some of our business. We are trying to design around that, and we as a company do very, very well on the feedback we get, and we're constantly trying to design new products, one of which is something we've talked briefly about, Cake Insure, which I'm sure we can get into in a little bit.
Yes. Well, and I'd imagine that you tailor each service, right, per your customers. I know that some companies are going to need more coverage in specific areas than others, and you take a look at that and you sit down with them. I imagine there's some price points that you negotiate. So do you go into every meeting with your business, with your customers, with a fresh slate, or do you have templates along the way?
Well, it's interesting. So workers' compensation, which is the only insurance that we provide,
right,
and we only do it here in Colorado, is regulated in a way that we think is just great for the state. You wouldn't often hear a business person say that, but over time there has been, and Colorado should be applauded for it, businesses, government regulators came together and said, what's the best way that we can orchestrate and price workers' compensation insurance? So all the insurers that sell workers' comp have to file their prices. There's certain regulatory regimen that is in place. And the beauty of this, and what makes workers' compensation so special, is it feels like a win-win-win. So we as an insurer can provide great coverage. The businesses know their people are going to be well taken care of, and injured workers are going to get both the medical coverage as well as indemnity insurance to cover wage loss. And all of this is set where we have to file rates, and the only ways that the rates are governed by, they're set by after we file them, they're ruled on by the state, and then the basic differences are really twofold relative to pricing. So it's going to be based on the risk of the overall business.
Okay.
So if
you don't mind.
So as an example, so we're at our radio station right now. So the general risk of a radio station is going to be less than, let's say, oil and gas or construction. That seems pretty obvious on its face. And then we look at, you'd fall into a certain code for the type of work, industry, and then we'd look at the job types of each of the people. So you, as a radio interviewer, broadcaster, don't have a particularly risky job unless
I do push-ups in here occasionally.
Unless the interview goes badly or something, and I notice there's nothing that anybody can throw on the desk here. So that very different than somebody that's working out in an oil and gas a gas patch. So essentially, all those come together, and then we filed our rates based on the risks of the workers and the company, and then the other key variable in which employers, and we feel it's a real encouragement to them, is there's something called EMOD, which is essentially a term of art that says, based on your experience, so that's the E, so for an experience modification, if you are at or about the average of those in your industry doing similar work, you'd be at 1.0. But if you were a lot worse, and say you have 50% more injuries, severity of injuries, you could be paying, so we would quote a rate of, let's say, $1,000. But if you've had over a 3-year period, a lot of injuries and serious accidents, you could end up paying, let's just say if it was 1.5, you could pay $1,500. Or the reverse would be true, that if you are one of the safer amongst the same kind of industries, you could be at a 0.5 EMOD. So there's a great incentive for employers to take very, very seriously, how do we keep our people safe? And working with us, if somebody does get injured, how do we work with them to get them back to work as quickly as possible, but to make sure that they're in a good spot to go back to work. Because if you rush somebody back to work and they get re-injured, that doesn't help anybody, least of all the workers. So it's a rather complicated process, and one of the things that we've done is we've tried to uncomplicate a lot of that through some stuff that we can talk about in a few minutes, our Cake Insure product.
Well, actually, that's where I was going to head with this.
Well,
let's talk cake.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Good. So as you can imagine from my description there, the process of, if you were starting a new business and coming in and saying, I need workers' compensation for myself and my 5 people, you might go through an agent, you might come to us directly, but generally across every insurance company, there would be probably 80, 90 questions that you'd be asked about every aspect of business, and some of which is not even germane. Like, do you use a boat, or are you train travel? There could be all kinds of questions. And a lot of times you wouldn't have the answers readily available, either you or your agent. So it could be a 2-3 day kind of back and forth, or it could go on for a couple of weeks, just let me get that, etc. Well, we've tried to, going back to your question on customer focus, tried to reimagine what that could be like. And so about a year and a half ago, we tasked a small group of people to come up with something that totally reimagines the way that small businesses that come to us directly, and about 30% of our customers in the small business market come to us directly, try to reimagine what that experience could be like. And we took a few people from Pinnacol, we brought in some outside people who've done a lot of customer-centered design, etc. And we said, we're going to put you in some separate offices down in the Rhino area. You're not going to have to deal with all the stuff you're dealing with, as you go through your regular work here at Pinnacol. And went to our board, got a budget, and said, I tasked the team to say, within 1 year, we want to launch a small business workers' compensation product that can provide the quoting, the binding, the underwriting, and give somebody a policy totally digitally and do it in 5 minutes or less.
Wow. And
you've got 1 year to do it. So that was the challenge that our Cake Insure team and our CEO there, a gentleman named Rob Norris, who had been with us about 20 years as our Chief Information Officer, a couple of our top programmers and a couple other staff, plus a team that they then hired. And these guys not only met this, but they exceeded the expectations. 9 months after they started, we launched last October, and have been exceeding expectations on both the revenue. We're particularly proud of the feedback we're getting from our customers. The customer scores are off the charts, and so we're very, very proud of the work that we've done, and we're getting a lot of national recognition for this.
Good, you should. That's amazing. First of all, congratulations
on
that. Yeah, from ideation to launching in 9 months. That's not an easy feat, particularly for something that you're building from scratch, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you have any examples of these customer feedback? Is there any one in particular that maybe stands out for you?
Well, there. And I wish I could remember the names of the businesses or individuals, because we do have them on our website because we use the quotes. But we've been very consistently getting back feedback like, "I am blown away. You say on the website that it's going to happen in 5 minutes or less. I've worked with a lot of insurance companies, and it never does. And you exceeded my expectations." One of the things we track is called the Net Promoter Scores, and that's a term of art in the marketing world for customer satisfaction. The very, very best insurance companies are tracking probably in the high 40s or low 50s. Cake is in the mid 70s for Net Promoter Score out of 100, and very consistent with a lot of the very best digital companies. And that's something that we are tracking all the time, because we really want to be dialed into, we want this to be the best customer experience ever, and then we continue to build on that. And then with Pinnacol, who's handling a lot of the bigger accounts, we then share feedback, share some of the technology and the approaches that we're taking, so that we're constantly iterating on great ideas and ways that we can meet the customer's needs.
Yeah. Well, and I wanted to ask that actually, because again, Cake is solely focused on small business, right?
Yep.
Is there a program that we might be able to implement for bigger businesses, for larger companies? As we know, with a larger company, everything just takes longer. It's inevitable.
Certainly. So we are just in conversation right now with a few of our agents about, because most of our the larger businesses, which are more complicated, they have different kinds of needs, generally will go through an agent, which agents and our agent partners, work very closely. They're very knowledgeable about the variety of options and how different businesses can, make sure they're getting the right coverage, but at the right price. And so, as we've seen we get a lot of businesses coming through, we see opportunities that we can start to take some of the same kind of technology, using outside data sources to more quickly start to do this. And so we want to test that with some of our agents as well. So, like anything else, things start small, and we'll probably move upstream. But our belief is that for the more complicated, larger businesses, there's a place at which it's really critical for a business owner to have the benefit of an agent who really understands the broad array of insurance products, how they all fit together, and make sure that the business and then the business's employees are well covered.
Awesome. If I were a small business owner, where can I find Cake?
Just go to look up cakeinsure.com, and you'll find it, or come to pinnacol.com, and you will get that information and get right over. And you can probably complete it online in 5 minutes or less, or we always have our customer care people there that can walk you through if there are any questions.
Wonderful. I appreciate you letting our audience know that.
I'm always willing to sell a policy here. So,
so you mentioned this futures of work, right?
Yeah, sure.
And keeping your eye on the future, which is tough to do, but is a necessary feat, right, for every business.
Sure.
So let's talk a little bit about the future of Pinnacol, right? We mentioned that we are working and we've got some ideation here for a Cake similar for big businesses.
Sure.
But what else do you guys in the future have going on?
Well, so it's really interesting is we're watching the gig economy, for example, and lots of interplay. You hear a lot about robots and artificial intelligence and that whole array. We've seen since the time we did the ideation of Cake, we've seen how quickly, and actually it exceeded our expectations, how quickly the market moved. And so we stepped back a couple months ago, and we brought in some outside people and then did some work that literally was saying, what is the future of work? Let's try to imagine all the different things that are going to be shaping the world of work and workers over the next 10, 12 years. And as you can imagine, there's the confluence of people are going to be working longer. but there's this whole influx of Gen X, Gen Z coming up that are all digital natives. We have expectations that have been honed by our customer experiences with the Amazons and the Googles. There is even, here's a wonderful factoid that we got about how people are going to be living longer, that there are futurists that are saying literally that there is a person born already that could live to be 500 years old. Well, yes. So imagine you're going to be in this job for another 400 years, Alex.
I'm okay with that.
You're okay with that. But so you start to think about, with genetics and with 3D printing of organs, and then you start imagining all kinds of other kinds of trends that we're going to be seeing there. In terms of construction, we heard a story coming out of China that with 3D printing, automation, robots, they literally built a 50-story building in 19 days. So now they didn't talk about the 20th day, so I don't know whether the building fell down or not. But you start to think about all of those different trends that are starting to take shape. The automated, autonomous driving, etc. And you think about how all those then start to come to influence what does work look like, what are workers going to be like in a few years, where there's going to be more robots, more automation. So the training, the skills that workers are going to have is going to change dramatically. Well over 50% of the jobs that we'll be seeing in 2030 haven't even been invented yet. So for our company, and I would argue any company, you need to be thinking about those long-term trends. Not that you can predict the future, but you can start to see where things are going, and you have to start to ask yourself the question, where do I fit in that? Mm-hmm. And if there's a lot more gig workers that aren't employed by anybody, that changes our business model. As more, one of our biggest sources of injuries are car accidents and truckers and truck accidents. Well, if they're automated, autonomous vehicles, the projection is that there's going to be a 90% reduction in the amount of accidents. It starts to change a lot of things. If you start to use robotics for construction, all of those things really impact the risks associated with these things and the number of people employed in various kinds of positions. So we want to make sure we're prepared for that. But also what we talk to with our employees, and I think for any employer to an employee, is we all have to imagine, kind of where do we fit in to a fast-changing world, and how do we, as businesses, as society, and as workers, how do we all prepare for those very earth-shattering kinds of transitions and changes that we can all expect?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I, for one, hope that you want to hear human voices for a lot longer so I can stay on the radio,
Absolutely.
Right?
And I can tell your radio listeners that you are a live human, and this is not a robot talking to you. So.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you, Phil. I do have one last question here before we go to break. And what keeps you up at night?
What keeps me up at night is trying to anticipate that future. And for a large company here in Colorado that it has a 100-year history, I am constantly thinking about, what's it look like 3, 5, 10 years down the path, and how do we prepare our organization, our customers, and our people to be ready to embrace that future and have the right products, the right services, and done in ways that are going to just wow our customers long term. And so it's thinking about the future and making sure that this big ship that we're steering right now, which is Pinnacol Assurance, is turned and positioned for exactly what the businesses of Colorado want and need.
Yeah, well, you are well on your way, and you've already got yourselves very well established within the industry. It has been a pleasure having you on, Phil. Thank you so much for your conversation today and for your partnership with Pinnacol Assurance.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, be sure to check out Pinnacol Assurance in the break, and like and subscribe our YouTube page while you're here. Check out this podcast and more at cobrt.com/radio.